Hi, everyone. This is a Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And thank you for joining me. This is a solo show today, so no guests. It's been a long time since you've heard from just me. And there's been so much that has taken place in our world since you heard from me last. Oh, COVID-19. I cannot tell you how many times a day that I say that. And my oldest, my daughter, is getting so sick and tired of hearing COVID. She's like, what is going on with our world? We are so obsessed with it. But it is pervading so many of our thoughts and our decisions, right? So I remember when I first found out about kind of the spike in March, I was coming back from a conference. It was called No Longer Virtual. And I had a great time. But while I was there, I was getting text messages from worried family members and getting different bits and pieces from the news. And, my worries were abound. And so, I got home and it was, lockdown and everything just went crazy. And my kids were home all working, doing distance learning. And the stress from my end was really off the charts. And that was because I had to deal now with 4 kids at home when I'm normally, I work from home and they're at school. And so now all of us are here, all 6 of us, and, trying to manage through it. So the first 2 weeks, I had a hard time. I was drinking too much wine, eating too much chocolate, to be honest. But then I just made a decision and I said, look, I have to get myself out of this for the betterment of a family. I had to get out of it. So I decided to just start moving forward. Okay, what am I going to do? I need to pivot. Because all of my events became either virtual or canceled or rescheduled. I had to figure out what I was going to do. Well, one thing I had to get done was the book. And so I feel excited to be able to report that I did finish that first draft of that book, and I was able to get it off to the publisher, and they sent it out to reviewers. And now I'm just getting reviews back from those 3 reviewers. And that now gives me an opportunity to look through those with a fine-tooth comb, look back at my manuscript, and start to work to make those changes based upon what their feedback was. Not all of it was awful. Most of it was very insightful, and there wasn't anything that made me cry. So I think that's the good news, is no one said, you know what, this is just a piece of not so great stuff and you need to go back to the drawing board. That was nothing like that. So I feel good that didn't happen, but I do have work to do to get that done. So I'll come back to that. But one of the other things that has happened and it continues to happen really throughout U.S. history is this treatment of people of color, predominantly Black Americans, but also others of color. And, when I think about that history, I'm learning more and more, just as many of you are at this point. We have to stop seizing the opportunity in the negative sense of treating people of a darker skin as lesser people. And historically, that's how it's gone. And it's been kind of opportunistic and self-interested. And so we that's the thing we need to do. But we can't change fully the system and the processes and how America is formed. And we might have, some of us listening may actually have that kind of power and control to do it. But most of us, though, have the ability to control first our mindsets and how we think of all humans, all people that are put before us. How we are supposed to be interacting with them, how we are to show up, how we are to stand up. And so I think the key for us to be thinking about is what role do we play in it and what role do we play in the solution to it? And every single one of us has a role to play in the place that we're at and in the place where we can go. And so that message on that particular topic, I want you to remember, is just to know that you do have and possess a certain amount of power and authority and ability to, in your own shoes, show up differently, and to, not to be anti-racist, and to, support all humans, all people, all your brothers and sisters that are around you. And so I would ask for you to do that, to stand solidly in your own shoes and take your own responsibility and be accountable for your own things, and not to get completely overwhelmed with like every single thing in the world, because we can't control everything. But we can control lots of things, and we can influence many. Lastly, one of the things that came in my heart when I was writing the book, The Art of Caring Leadership, is this title, The Art of Caring Leadership, Why Leading with Heart Uplifts Teams and Organizations. And of course, it's based upon this podcast and all the people I've interviewed. And I adore every single one of my guests that have been on the show. And I see so much richness and so much value. And I didn't set out to write this book when I started this podcast, but a little ways in, I realized I have got to share these people with the world. But as I wrote this book, I noticed that I put so much of their voices in it. And it felt weird to have so many voices, because there's like 90. And the reviewers, all three of the reviewers, while they felt those voices were impactful and they loved that I included, kind of an aggregate of people and broke down different themes, they wanted to hear more about me, more about my stories, more about my lived experiences. And that was a big wake-up call for me. Because if you know me, you know that I find great excitement and thrill by highlighting and uplifting others. And so now, all of a sudden, I have to turn it on myself and share more than the tidbits of stories I gave, or share more of the very specific things I've done to produce great relationships in the workplace. And so it's less about the other people. And I have to tell you, given my background, many of you have been listening for a while. I have a kind of a bumpy background where I was an outsider in my own home, and I had this feeling of not being good enough and not being worthy and not being important and not being heard. And thus, that's why I'm on the road I am right now, to do the work that I do. But in that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, this idea of not being worthy just popped up again. Because all three of the reviewers were like, I want to hear more. I am clamoring to hear more about Heather's story. I want to hear more about what she is doing and what she has done and how we can emulate that. So I think there was this level of not being valuable, not being worthy, not being good enough that just continues to in and out shine its head. And so because I have a higher level of self-awareness, and I'm getting, and I know where this comes from, I am now going to recommit as I sit down to write now this second draft of this book with the reviewers' comments and their feedback and their insights, and my editor's comments and his insights, and go through that process that is going to be a little painful, but I know it's going to be worth it. I'm going to sit down now, and I'm going to put more of me into it. I'm going to put more of my heart into it. I'm going to realize that there's value, that there's that I'm not only good enough, but I'm very good. And that I was made that way. And I'm going to make sure that it comes through inside the book, and that I include more of myself, and that I use more of the higher thinking that I know is inside of me, and not keep things topical. So that's my promise to you. So hopefully all of you listening will, at some point when the book comes out, you'll get a copy. You'll let me know how well I did. You'll sniff test it for me, hold me accountable. But I appreciate all of you being with me on this journey. And I hope that you are sharing this podcast and these different episodes far and wide. And I also hope that you've done reviews on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen, because remember, that's how people find a show, because it kind of moves up on the algorithm the more reviews we get. And so I would ask for you to do that for me today, if you can, to write a review after you listen to this, and that would be super helpful. So a few of the kind of calls to action for you. One call to action is standing solidly in your shoes, figuring out the role you play in not just the past, but in the solution to what's happening right now in America with our racial divide. The second thing is to keep me accountable for what's happening, everything around the book and what I say I'm going to do as far as loading my heart and my soul into it. And then the third thing is, if you could go write a review for the podcast, that would be awesome, because this is a community, and I'm here for you as well. So if you ever have any feedback, there's something that you want to talk to me about, there's someone you want to refer to me, please do that, because there's not one person I've turned down who's come to me, who is a listener of my show, and that's referred another person to me, I always say yes. I don't even see a situation where I would not. So thank you for listening and being with me for this solo show. Know that my heart is with you and my prayers are as well. Be well. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.